Good morning, guys. Happy New Year. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited for 2025. Today's guest, Steven Falk from Vancouver. He's founder and CEO of Switchback Systems. It's a safety leadership consulting firm, and he's going to talk to us all about human agency, mental toughness, breaking bad habits, and I'm really happy to have him on. So, Steven, welcome.
Thank you very much, Christopher. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Welcome into the new year and just briefly introduce yourself, and I'm excited to dive into the questions.
Sure. So my new year maybe looks a little bit different than others because our origin clients are all logging companies. And so tomorrow I have a double header of two startup meetings. So logging companies where they actually take like crew boats way out into inlets and they live on float camps and they work, let's say 10-day shifts and they come out for 4. They're actually meeting in hotels for just one day, like their one-day meeting a year, and they just pummel them with like the stats for last year and how things are going. And they have then a human factor, inspirational teacher on safety. And so that's me. So it's that time of year where I've got 4 of those lined up in the next 3 days.
Wow. Yeah, excellent. And what is Switchback OS? Tell us more about that.
Switchback OS is a kind of hard to define, but we started in the safety culture world, and essentially our job was to try to figure out why good people in heavy industry would make critical mistakes that had catastrophic results, even though they wanted to follow the rules. They were the rule keepers. They were essentially good people with families and mortgages and boats in the driveway. And yet, in the right circumstances, with the right stimulus, they would make like not just 1, 2, 3, but sometimes 14 critical decision-making errors. And the companies that the company that basically captured me out of my previous career, they had done everything they thought. They had certified and qualified and had rules and regulations, and the regulators were working with them. And so you can only paint so many yellow lines and you can only supervise so much until finally it comes down to human agency. Why were these individuals not able to exercise mental toughness and human agency in the heat of the moment? And we solved that problem for them.
And for the audience, when they first hear of terms such as human agency, define that or describe it.
Oh, sure. So human agency is, no matter what the circumstances, human agency says that you have the ability to choose your next thought. You have the ability to choose your next behavior. And the one that made that famous was Viktor Frankl with his classic book coming out of the Holocaust, Man's Search for Meaning. He basically said, we choose when we live and die. Nobody else has charge of it. That's human agency at its highest level.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, really, because this podcast is all about business entrepreneurship, but at the heart of it is self-development and this ability to control for yourself for optimal performance. We'll dive right into it. And a lot of the audience, they're in high stakes industries, law, medicine. So talk about your thoughts and thesis on building resilience in these high stakes industries, mental toughness and leadership.
Honestly, I think like we work in those industries too, like medical and legal, and that's a tougher world than, believe it or not, logging and wildland fire. So I would say 80% of our clientele are like in wildland fire, like senior leaders and boots on the ground, and also like logging and manufacturing. But here they have a physical outlet to resolve some of the, let's say, the cortisol buildup or the adrenaline buildup that happens in a high stakes situation. Whereas a lawyer working, let's say a partner in a firm, and they're having cash flow problems and there's payroll coming and they have a client that just stiffed them. Where is there in that moment, where is their physical outlet? Whereas a logger can march up a hill, or a wildland fire person can do something physical to actually work the poison out of their bodies. A lawyer or a doctor or someone like that, they have to maintain this professional persona because they're wearing the costume of professionalism. And so actually their task of mental toughness is quite a bit more complex than my best friends who are the boots on the ground industrial people.
Yeah, interesting. And this with this idea, like the leader, you talked about the switched on leader. What is switch on leader, and how can people think like a world-class CEO, even though they're not in that role? But talk about studying top performers.
Sure. So Christopher, thank you so much because you're referencing my book. So I wrote a book called The Switched On CEO, How to Think Like a World-Class Leader. And it's basically the origin story of our company. I'll break it down into 2 pillars and then probably 3 mindsets. And I'll go pretty quick in this. So the first pillar is you actually 100% have to believe that you can change. So some people are pretty stuck on, this is my family of origin, this is my ethnic background, this is my economic background I came from, and they have this belief that some of that stuff is static. None of it is. None of it is. I remember I was an expert witness in court. This is a sidebar, but I'll come back to it. And the judge asked me a question about a person around child protection and said, Mr. Falk, do you think people can change their personalities? And I'm like, oh, I could feel in the room. I said, this is a trick question. The judge is definitely it's an entrapment question, right? So I thought for a bit, okay, how do I answer this? And what popped in my head, I said, Your Honor, I honestly don't think people can change their personalities. However, here's the human agency. Here's the pillar number 1, neuroplasticity, which is people can change. So pillar 1, people can change. I said, people can be functional or dysfunctional in their personality. They can be healthy or unhealthy in their personality. They can choose to be grounded and targeted and focused in their personality, or they can be all over the map. And she goes, oh my, that was a very good answer. And I got congratulations from both sides, the lawyers on both sides of that, on the courtyard on the steps outside the court. They're like, Steve, you crushed it, man. Like she's trapped so many professionals on that question, and you came in blind, and that was a good answer. So number 1, people can change. If you can establish that for yourself and the people you work with, it's a game change. It's like a core value. Number 2, how do people change? Is you really need to access team. And that is the hardest thing for professionals. Because professionals, like, they've gone to school, they get their degrees, they get their certifications, then they're like, they're the top dog, and I really don't need to consult with anybody, or have a lower level person like a therapist or a counselor somehow guide me, or a coach. And so it's pretty hilarious. There are so many really well-intentioned, very intelligent, technically astute professionals that have massive human factor blind spots. And nobody has the courage to give them feedback because often they're the boss. And so how do you give the boss feedback? If you're an employee, you're not going to do it. You're going to just say, yes, boss. And so a boss needs to humble themselves and say, okay, I can change. The people around me can change. Our clients can change. Secondly, how are we going to change? We're going to have to be able to accept feedback from others. We have to welcome it, create a culture of feedback. And when a law firm or a professional practice develops that as a foundational sort of culture within their space, holy moly, that's a game change.
Oh, interesting. Next question I have for you is this idea of resilience and leadership. And how do you recommend leaders build and sustain resilience and mental toughness, both personally and within their teams?
The way we've broken it down into sort of a granular 2-piece is we talk about the battle of the brain. And we say, hey, you have a part of your brain that's well developed for leadership and building teams. And so do all your colleagues and team members. There's a part of your brain that is completely like ready to go. Otherwise, you wouldn't have hired him, and people wouldn't be employed, and you wouldn't have gotten your professional designation. However, there's another part of your brain. We call it front brain, back brain. So the front brain is your asset. The back brain is your liability. It's your kryptonite. It's the devil you don't know. And that part of the brain is not geared for being a leader or developing team. And that part of the brain can hijack you at any moment if you don't sort it out. And so we say, you've got to understand your thoughts, which is metacognition. And then secondly, you have to manage your memories. And so managing memories is the key to leadership development and team development. I know it sounds like we're going backwards rather than forwards. Forward saying, let's just go on a leadership retreat and all like bond over bowling. That's great. But in the heat of the moment, when you want to cuss out your number 2, that's not your front brain talking anymore. That's your back brain hijacking the situation. You got to sort out that. You got to figure out, where is that coming from? Or why do I have a part of my brain that thinks catastrophic thoughts? even though it's not a catastrophic situation. Why do I get an adrenaline rush when I get an email from a certain client? The email shows up in my inbox and you literally get a shot of adrenaline. And it's not good adrenaline. It's adrenaline with cortisol. And so if your listeners are able to pause just for a second and go, hold on, instead of just powering through, I need to become nuanced here. I need to slow my breathing down and ask the question, why did I just get an adrenaline rush with this client? And which part of the brain was triggered? Obviously, it's your back brain. It's the fight freeze response. And what is the memory that's associated with that? If they can do that simple step, that's how you build resilience, because we need to harvest those memories as adults out of our back brain and move them into our front brain. We actually have to move memories. And through the process of moving those memories, we build resilience and mental toughness so that the next time we have a similar stimulus, the brain's trying to find purpose and meaning and order, because that's what it does. It doesn't go to the back brain to harvest a memory, because that memory is not there anymore.
Interesting. Next question I have for you is this team dynamics and with remote work, what are the most unproductive common habits in teams, and how can leaders guide their teams to break these habits?
Remote work, like people working like from their home offices. Is that what you're talking about?
Remote and hybrid work.
Yes, got it. Oh yeah. Number one, cameras on. Number two, build buffers. So I remember when COVID hit, we started something just because we have a really well curated email list, because a lot of our clients are like federal government employees or leaders because of the wildland fire and such. And so we just want to stay in touch with them. So we started something just a monthly called an innovation team meeting. So anybody that was part of our email list could just join this team meeting. But we strategically planned it out where it's like a regular team meeting, like all the other ones you've been on before. What's the agenda? Who's speaking first? Okay, let me share my screen. And here comes the PowerPoint and blah, blah, blah. And then, oh, I forgot to unshare my screen. And then, wow, an hour's gone by. That was death, another version of death. And so what we did was we were aware of that. And so even with a smaller group, we would do breakouts. I know it sounds odd, but the technology is there. It's so easy to do a random breakout. So Christopher, you and I, if we were running a meeting with 20 of our remote workers, we'd say, okay, here's the question. We have to come up with more of a robust follow-up program from when we've done our active training. So we've done a 3-day training. Now we have to do more of a, let's brainstorm together. Okay, so we're going to get into breakouts. You're going to have 50 minutes together. Okay, it's randomized, so we haven't chosen. Okay, ready? The breakout starts now. Bloop. Awesome. Now there's accountability and there's responsibility. And oh, by the way, you're going to report out of your breakout as well. And please populate the chat, or if you can create a document in the next 50 minutes, that'd be great. So there's some time pressure. And then, okay, after some of those, just the etiquette around the meeting model where you're really holding people accountable and responsible to stay engaged, then you have to somehow build the parking lot or the water cooler. Like back in the day, it used to be a water cooler where people have great conversations after the meeting. But nowadays, when you still have meetings in person, the best conversations happen in the parking lot. The meeting's over, you're standing outside the parking lot, and that's where they're like, man, I had this great idea and I didn't say it, or man, that person really ticked me off. And so we have to create space with our remote workers to be able to have that chance to dialogue with each other. And so in that innovation meeting that we created during COVID, we called it a transition to fireside. Like there's some people camping, so I'm in a camping culture on Vancouver Island, of course, right? We have so many provincial and federal parks and mountains and streams and ocean and whales jumping into your house. And fireside is where you finish up your meeting and you leave about 15 to 20 minutes after the meeting. Everyone stays on, everyone keeps their videos on. You say, now let's just chat. Who wants to start? Who's got something going on in their life or in their workplace that's interesting? And someone will go, oh yeah, sure. Just a second. My son-in-law just bought they do exactly this. My daughter and son-in-law just bought a house. It's crazy. And see if I can find it. There's a stream on it. And so all of a sudden they're like holding up cameras and showing pictures. And then we talk about, there's some protocol even to a fireside is where you can't play the one up. Oh, if you think that's bad, Christopher, my story is even more dramatic than yours. Oh, you think that's bad, my story is even more. Instead of that, you have to do what they teach in kindergarten. So kindergarten starts off, the learning model is parallel play. You're playing here and I'm playing here, and you and I, we might look at each other, but we're not sharing our toys. We're definitely not sharing the storyline. Right? That's kindergarten. But by Christmas, if you have a gifted kindergarten teacher, it's supposed to turn into integrated play. So I show up and go, Christopher, my buddy. And you go, Steve-O. And we go, want to go to the trucks? I go, yes. And so then we say, hey, do you want to play John Deere versus Caterpillar? Say, sure, let's do that. And so then we play together. And so with remote, we've lost the art of playing together. Integrated conversations. And it's think about it another way. You could think about it like a card game. Someone lays down a card and says, here's my son-in-law. They just bought or my daughter just bought a property, an acreage on an island. Oh, very interesting, say. And then instead of going a brand new random talk, but you say, oh, say more. So there's salmon in that river? Go, yeah, thanks for asking. Yes, there is. Next person says, because I'm West Coast, right? I said, I've got this great salmon recipe for smoking with a smoke. I used to smoke always with older, but now I'm doing mesquite. I go, oh, that's so interesting. And all of a sudden your team, they're not talking about making money for your team. They're talking about smoked salmon. And you got to think about, at the end of the day, when you ask them to cooperate, when they're tired and grumpy and feel overworked and squeezed, it's the salmon stories that are for the win. It's not the win for the company. It's the fact that they found a common thread that built team. And it can be anything. It can be smoked salmon. It can be some athletic thing. It can be grandkids. It doesn't matter what it is. But you have to find the common themes that are not related necessarily to work that then build a willingness to cooperate with each other because you feel the bond.
Yeah, interesting. And I really love how you really elaborated on that concept. A lot of organizations are very complex and very bureaucratic, inefficient. And what are your go-to methods for breaking down these complex challenges in an organization to simple, actionable strategies?
I think there's that saying that says, control what you can control. When we analyze and let's choose the Forest Service, for example, 40,000 employees broken into all these different regions, and then broken down into forests, then broken into districts, ranger districts. So when we ask a ranger district, how are you guys doing? Are you guys in team? Are you getting along with each other? By and large, they'd say, we're good. But the forest leadership, they don't have a clue what we're doing. And you know what? The regional leadership, they're completely in their ivory tower. They have no idea. And Washington, D.C., you might as well just be like, a monkey could run the show better than that. That's in every organization, is that we look in the mirror with our own team and say, we're dialed in, we're doing it. But that next level, they're not doing it. And so the cool thing with our company is we train Washington, D.C., and then we train the leaders at the regional level. And then we train the leaders at the forest level. And then we train the leaders at the ranger district level. And they're all amazingly talented people. So it's a mindset. People have this fun, or let's say pick Boeing, another great example. On your floor during your shift, you go, Steve, we're totally dialed in with all the principles of Switchback. Like, we believe people can change. We're committed to teamwork. We're doing fireside conversations to each other. Like, we understand, the smoked salmon story. Like, we understand all that. We're doing it. We're dialed in. But it's our second level leaders. They have no clue. And Puget Sound doesn't have a clue. And Arlington. So what we do is we say, we have an unconscious bias where we look in the mirror and say, our team is awesome and everybody else sucks. And you have to actually adjust that bias. You actually have to change your mind. You have to come to the belief that Washington, D.C., when those leaders are coming up with a policy that's going to affect the entire agency, they're trying really hard to do a good job. And they're dialed in. And if you start with that as your belief, rather than they suck and they don't have a clue and they're in an ivory tower, start to believe was that their intention was right, was good, then you'll find those Easter eggs within the process. You'll go, oh, I can see that now. Oh, I see how you added the human factor to that. I can see your point. And when you do that, then large organizations start honoring the hierarchy rather than throwing the hierarchy under the bus.
Interesting.
And when you end up in a culture of honor in a larger organization, that's a game change.
I love your reference to monkeys, and but that's a different story. How can people find you and reach out to you and follow you?
Because most of our work is really corporate, like small business entrepreneurs, like we help like a dentist office dial in all the way to like the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the United States. Like we're helping both of those agencies dial in. One has 20 employees, the other has 8,000. And so because our world is corporate that way, our best way to find us is at switchbackos.com. So the OS stands for operating system. So switchbackos.com, just like any other website, there's a contact us. And when you go contact us, guess what? It populates my email and also my business partners and our IT. And we all go, wow, a random email from Austin, Texas. Very interesting.
Oh, yeah, great. Thanks so much for coming on, and Happy New Year. Keep up the great work, and I really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Christopher. Happy New Year to you as well.